Okay, so here we are. Thank you, Grzegorz and Mateusz, that you joined the webinar. For all folks that miss it live, we'll be doing the first one, I hope, interaction and not only broadcast that I'll be giving. It will be still driven by me. I hope that the next webinar will be more driven by you. But today we'll try to model a simple, but as we probably will see later, and not so trivial to implement a distributed process. So the domain that we will be handling is the hotel management, and one part of the guest stay journey. So we will try to model the group checkout, and group checkout is a quick way for the clerk and also for like the group guest group manager to quickly check out from the hotel. So still, all of our guest stays will be recorded as a single guest stay because we would like to have a clean understanding of what's going on there, etc. For each particular stay. For example, we would like to be able to just check out a single guest because this person might decide to leave the, for example, integration party earlier, so stay only 2 days while the whole group event will last 3 days. So we will still would like to keep all of the capabilities and possibilities of the single guest stay management. Of course, we will use a really simplified process, but I hope that this will already give you the basic tooling and show the basic thought process of what we need to achieve. And so practically, there will be some UI where a person will be going by click, 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 or select all with the checkboxes on the list and decide which guests we would like to check out. And after that, if all of those guests have still the balance settled, we will be trying to check out all of them. It might be sequentially, it might be in parallel, doesn't matter. In the end, the result, what we would like to achieve is to have those guests checked out. And we have the following rule, which is the main rule, is that we cannot check out guests until their balance is settled. And we also wouldn't like to allow user to record some payments or charges after they are checkout. So checkout is like a hard end. If someone checked out, then they cannot, for example, decide that if they go to the hotel bar, that they will order some beer or some food for their hot guest stay account. They will need to pay with the cash or the credit card immediately. But until they are there, then they will have all of the charges per single night and all of the charges, like all of the things that they bought, they will be able to record on the guest stay. So, folks, do you have any questions about this simplified guest checkout process? Is it clear enough?
Yeah, it's totally clear for now. It's the
Okay.
basic process. Currently.
Okay. Yeah, I can say that I was implementing such process in my commercial project, and in fact it's much more complicated. And in a hotel industry, group reservations are quite crazy thing. But yeah, we won't be trying to model all of that. So let's try to maybe I will start with showing you how the simple process could look like. So sorry, not this one. So at first, the beginning of the guest stay is that the guest needs to check in. Usually it's going through the either some desk where the clerk is working, some manual, sometimes there is some automated check-in or through application, but for us it doesn't matter. We just need to know whether someone is already in the room and should we be processing that. Then in the hotel industry, it's like every night, because in hotel department, it's like that you everything is happening within the specific day. So after each day, there is an end of day process that, for example, processing all of the charges. So if you are buying a stay for 3 nights, then this charge will be automatically recorded for the specific night during that process. But you can have also other charges, like I mentioned, for example, buying something in the bar or using some other facilities. So we will just use that simplified that charge is something that is making our account balance going down. Then we might want to also have the payments. So payment is that we are deciding to pay for something. So this might be paying immediately for our lunch or just paying in advance or at the end of our stay. Usually it happens either during the check-in, if we would like to pay in advance, or typically if we are doing the final checkout. Hey, Stephen, you can have a look on the explanation in the yellow card at the top right corner of what we are trying to model. So group checkout. And right now I'm just showing the process of the simplified process for the specific guest. So the final one, when guest just would like to leave the room, is the guest checked out event. It means that everything was already processed successfully. It was verified that our balance, so the amount of payments is equal to the amount of charges. Typically, there is more into that. So someone goes to the room and verify that there is nothing broken there, etc. But this is like a happy path of our guest stay. So we could probably even name it, put it like that, and just tell that this is our guest stay. Right. So any questions to this process? Nope. Then
I have one. So
Yep.
currently we want to, I would say, payment recorded connected with the guest stay, or there's something, there will be some, this, I would say, event will be some shareable with some other part of our system, or we want to keep in this guest stay, because I think it's a little bit fuzzy currently, in my opinion, of course.
I mean, it will be typically, maybe let's model it like that already. So the typically you don't have just a single entity representing the guest stay. So typically it's like you have a guest stay, you have a guest stay account. Guest stay is related to all of the things that are not related to money. So every action, operation, like prolonging stay, etc., is happening on this entity. And this one is just responsible for everything that is related to finance. And in fact, we would have probably all of those transactions happening as separate entities. At least that's what I had in my system. Each transaction was a separate entity. However, we would still need here some information and some events representing that our balance increased or decreased, and what was the reason of why is it happening. So typically,
I have few questions. First question is about reservation. We will probably, there is some chance that we have reservation, or second, I would say option, if there's chance, for example, to, sorry. So, sorry, my child is, there is some chance, for example, to, I would say, to pay by cash or something like that, or that we only want to focus about, or maybe we have both options, or we want to focus currently on one.
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, we do not care about whether someone paid with cash or not, but that's a valid comment, because we would probably typically we would have a different type of events for each type of operation, because some, yeah, the money thing is really complex. Like, for example, there are charges, paid outs, debits, etc. And you can have like even a negative charge, which means that you are getting some money. Then, but we won't be focusing on modeling the specific domain in extreme details. We would be more focused on what's happening from the big picture. So we can assume that, for example, typically there is some reservation that eventually ends up with both, like in parallel, there are two created things, so guest stay and guest stay account. And guest stay is related to like the processing of the guest stay, so all of the things related to like keeping, cleaning, etc. And then we have also the financial account. But let's say that here there might be multiple types of charges and multiple types of payments, but here we are just curious about how to settle the guest stay, because we have this requirement that guests can check out only if balance is settled. So we can schedule additional session or webinar that we can drill into take some real requirements and drill into the bottom of the requirements. But right now, the intention is to model like the general process rather than focusing on all the nitty-gritty details. Is it fine?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Then thanks, but good calls. Especially that I didn't send you upfront the details of what we will be doing. That probably I should have done it. Okay, let me zoom it a bit. So we need to also distinguish some comments. Let's say this will be a blue one. And this will be checking guest. And we will have also, of course, record charge, record payment, and checkout guest. Okay. So that gives us the basic flow of the journey of a guest. So let's right now think how would we implement the group checkout? Any ideas of how you would tackle that? Okay, then let me give you some more clues. So let's say that there is a clerk, and this clerk decides that we would like to check out all of those guest accounts. And as I mentioned, to check out the group, we would need to have we would need to do a set of or a sequence or parallel checkouts, the regular checkouts of the single guest stay. So to do that, we cannot just like the easiest option, if we would like to achieve that, would be to just spin up 10 comments and try to and hope that everything will go smoothly and all of the guest checkouts will be checked out. But as we already know, this is not so trivial. Like we could try to even spin up unit of work around it, so the database transaction, and that could work if we have like only a few or several entities to update. That's one of the possible options, especially if we don't have a lot of operations that can happen in parallel. The major issue around that is that the process usually takes more things to complete. We will be doing a simple one, which just have a few steps. But for example, during the checkout process, it's the real checkout process, when the financial account initiates the checkout, then it's also a distributed process because all of the things needs to be verified. So for example, that housekeeping didn't send information that there is something wrong with the room, or that from the reservation module perspective, everything is settled and the guest stay is marked as checked out, etc. So it quite often requires changes in multiple modules. So if we had that within the single module, then this would be an option to do that, but not always. So what we can do is to try to model that in a multiple step way. So the first step that the clerk will be doing is to select a number of guest stay that we would like to check out. And then we are starting this process by recording the event that this group checkout was initiated. We will keep there all of the information about the all selected guest stay to checkout. So it will be effectively a list or a collection of those. So this will be here. And after that, once we have that information stored and somewhere, this might be as an event. If we are using event sourcing, this might be just as a regular entity. Then we can spin up the comments, all of the comments that we will have here. So spin a number of checkout guest comments. And this can happen in the background thread. This might happen in the same thread, but as we have this information stored somewhere, then that gives us possibility to have a better troubleshooting, like a retry policy, if our process died, etc. But once we have that, and once we spin up all of those comments, we will try to model that maybe with those cards to show that better soon. So we can mark all of the guests, all of the checkouts that we initiated. So this will be typically either we can record a single event like guest checkouts initiated with information about those guest stay that we initiated. So we spin up those comments. Or it might be just a series of the guest checkout initiated event for each checkout that we started. So what's the difference between that? Because in a guest checkout, probably we won't have many operations. Typically, like, for example, in my previous company, we had a pretty big integration party where there was like 250 people. So if everyone would try to check out at the same time, then that could be 250, which is not extremely big. It's still manageable, even within the unit of work. But I was talking with one of my colleagues that we were discussing a similar process, and they have a job portal, and I mean job management, where some accountant can spin up like 10,000 paydowns to all of the employees. So this process and having all of those events logged somewhere, especially within the single stream, might be too much. Of course, it's hard to say where is it precisely the boundary and where it is too much. The other heuristic that we should take into the account is to think whether does it need to happen extremely fast. If it has to, then of course we need to probably do some performance optimization, and instead of recording all of those events, just keep it in some flattened current state, or just try to use this like the grouped event that I mentioned. But if it can just be run not within like a milliseconds or seconds, like if it can last like 1 minute, then probably we would be still able to process like 10,000 of events, even like that. So it's always should be done case by case.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I have one question. What would be in the case, for example, there we have very big building and we want to, for example, reserve. We have a lot, for example, 1,000 rooms reserved, and what in case when every guest will want to check out, and some person who will probably want to check in other person will be know about some time when the all people will be checked out, because currently something that every room will be locked as the time when they will totally check out how this checkout process will finish. There's something that this first event will inform other systems, and it's something that could allow other systems to inform that this room should be empty in the future.
Yeah, it is like that. So I renamed this entity because it's more like a guest room stay. So in the hospitality domain, the check-in comes from this module, some room stay module. Thanks to that, we can have a room stay entity and we can have a verification and source of truth whether someone is already in this room or not. And checkout starts with the financial account. And if we are doing this, in fact, we should also have it here, like checkout initiated here. And it also spin up comments to, for example, checkout guest, etc., from the room stay, and waits for the confirmation from the other module, because it's a process like that. But thanks to having this information in the particular module, like for the specific room, then if someone would like to check in, then they cannot check in until the room is already free.
Okay, but what, because I would say that I see I would say problem. If you of course have some manual hotel or something like that, it's more or less easier. But for example, there is some, I would say, very cheap hotels. Then there are a lot of like capsule hotel, like in Japan, and people want to, for example, there will be something that they will finish the day, I would say, reservation, and they should be automatically inform service and inform website or some I would say some system. It should import some system that this room should be empty, and there is some case, for example, I would say that I see some case, for example, there is capsule will be broke or something like that, and the time between I would say check this capsule or this room, and I would say trigger some event that this room is unviable, and some person who want to check in this room. There is some, I would say, case how to handle it. I would say that I see something like third option, like I would say some domain, something like something like only pure reservation, or some temporary check-in or something like that. What do you think about something like that? Some solution with temporary draft or something like that?
I mean, the hospitality industry is one of the worst that you can imagine, because everything can happen. It's like you can put a rule that you cannot check in if the guest is not checked out. But it quite often happens that, because this is working with humans, that someone in theory is marked as checked out, and you can check in this guest, and the guest is coming into, and it realize that there is a guy with the underwear sitting on the chair. And because, they just checked out, but they get back to the room because they left door open and decided to wait until the flight or train will appear. And typically there is, as I mentioned, we are just doing a simplified version of that process, because you have usually inventory module, and in the inventory module, you record all of the information, whether this room is available or not. Because, for example, someone can even checked out, but then the room is such a state, it's like totally broken, that you cannot even check in this guest. And sometimes it happens that even if you had the reservation and you arrive, and in theory you have empty room, but it appears that all of those rooms are broken because, for example, toilet crashed and just flooded everything with water, and not only the water, then you cannot give the room and you are all booked. And in that case, typically people are just moved to other hotel, or in the worst case, they have the money returned and they can search for their own one. So yeah, I agree with you that everything can happen here. And also the check-in process, usually it's also a dedicated process, and checked out process is also such one. And to cover that cases, usually there is a variety of different techniques are used. So for sure, optimistic concurrency is a must-have. Also some sort of pessimistic locking. So together with the optimistic, you can mark or flag some either guest stay or room as in a certain status. And that means that if it is in this status, then that means that, for example, it's under processing, and you shouldn't be doing anything around that. And in the case that you mentioned, those capsules, then of course, a lot of things are happening automatically nowadays. So for example, you can even have a quick check-in that will create reservation, create guest account, and immediately check in and do everything at once. So yeah, for sure, if we would try to model the whole process, then typically those two cards, like check-in guest and guest check-in, there is a lot of happening in between. And it might be that different modules will be involved, different entities will be involved, etc. So I think that this is a nice idea if we would just try to come up with some exact requirements, like you could bring from your system and be our, or someone else be our domain expert, or we can find some requirements in internet and try to crunch it on the next webinars. So I'm not sure if that answers your concern, but right now we are focusing on this specific flow and looking on it on the big picture, because we should start from big picture. And once we have this general understanding, then drill down and find out.
Yes, sorry. Sorry for that. I just want, I want to, yeah, I want to be curious about it only.
Yeah. I mean, those are good concerns. So as I mentioned, feel free to raise it. Today we have a small experiment because it's a bit different than what we will be doing, what we were doing. Then yeah, I'm happy that you're active and you are asking and raising those concerns. So thank you for that. Okay, then once we, so what we have right now, we initiated the process. We know what accounts, guest states we would like to check out. And we have as either one event or set of events like that we decided to check out all of those guests. And then we know that we should be waiting for the event's guest checkout. So we would be getting back information from each of that stream from after it succeeded. And once that's finished and all of those guest checkout events happened, then we can mark a group checkout as completed. So only after that. Not that size. So again, we spin up all of those comments and recorded that we initiated all of those specific guest stay checkouts. Then we are waiting for the information back. And once we completed all of that, then we can mark the whole process as completed. And here, if we would like to process like that, then this is what you, Mateusz, mentioned. And that's great that you told that. You said about the check-in process, but in fact, the most important and for me aspect of modeling in event-driven systems is that we shouldn't be focused on the specific entities. So for example, here we have a guest stay account. It's not precisely the guest stay. And as Mateusz said, we would have more entities like even check-in. And here we would have a group checkout. So there is no physical thing in the real life like a group checkout. The group checkout is a process. So it's more like a behavior driven. So we don't need to model our entities to just shape the physical things like room, guest, reservation, etc. It's required, if we would want to do it cautiously, to model the whole process as an entity. So think more about the verbs than nouns. So as Mateusz asked and mentioned, this part, the check-in, we might have also the check-in, guest check-in entity. that will be responsible for recording and managing all of the required steps to complete the guest check-in. And if we'd like to, let me just bring some commands. Okay. So the flow will look like that. We will have the checkout group. This is command that will be sent from our UI. And once we got those information that, yeah, in fact, we will have this single command will probably just spin up that one. And then we will have the command to record So we will have command that mark all of those checkouts that we selected as initiated. In theory, if we don't care about tracking the initiated commands, then we could probably even resign from this step. So we could just wait for the guest checkout events. But why it could be important? Do you have some thoughts whether the recording that we initiated, in fact, those commands, is it for you a good thing or some redundant step? What do you think? Okay, I hope that I didn't just wipe your head out and you are still bearing with me. So if you cannot just talk with
Okay, I
folks,
have one question.
yeah.
Sorry. I would say that for me, the group should invoke every guest. So I don't know if it's, I would say from a perspective, the group is some abstract on the, it's some, I would say, for each loop for the every guest. It's not, it's, of course, now it's complicated because currently if you have group, it's hard to modulate or maybe modify each reservation or of each guest because there should be something happen. And if there is something that group should be some abstract on the guest, so group should be first or optional for the guest.
Yeah, it might be that group is optional. You might be a part or you might not be a part of group. It just, I would call it some sort of metadata that could be useful for some processes, but not for all. Okay, then maybe let's try to model on a timeline how this could look like. So let's say that we have 3 guest stay accounts. They are right now like that. So this check is not checked out. It has 1 charge recorded and 1 payment recorded. This will be the guest stay account number 1. Then we have a guest stay account number 2. Maybe let's just skip those comments for now because they don't bring much value at the moment. Yep. So let's do it like that. Okay. So let's say that this is maybe charge for 100. and payment is also for 100. And then we have other guest account number 2, and we have again charge for 100, and we have 2 payments for 50. So it's also settled, right? The balance will be the same. The balance will be 0. And let's say that we have also another account, number 3, that has also another charge for 200. And we don't have any corresponding payment for that. So let's maybe give some color. So this one is the one that we should watch for. And we decided that we would like to check out all of those 3 guest stays. So let's take those events. So we decided that we will be checking out all of those 3 guest stay accounts. So number 1, number 2, and number 3. So we decided that we want to initiate checkout for those accounts. So we initiated that. And what we're gonna do right now is that we will spin up and send commands to each of these entity. Okay, never mind. Let check out guest. So all of those 3 entities will get such request. And what's gonna happen for all of them? For the first one, we will verify the condition that we specified above, that whether this account is already settled. And that means that it is, because 100 minus 100 means that this account is, this guest stay account is already settled. So, so that's okay. Let's check the other one. As we mentioned, this also have transaction settled. So we will have the new event recorded. And once that happened, then over here, will we get the checkout, guest checked out event, or what we will get? How we should handle that? What are your thoughts?
It depends. It's not trivial because currently now we have better separation. It's easier to modulate and I would say keep something separate and independent. But from my perspective, there should maybe there some event will be as a contract or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So let me just group. So if we are doing the distributed process or asynchronous process, then if we were handling that in memory, then we could just throw exception here. And then we would throw exception and then decide what we should do with the other one. If we are doing asynchronous process, because we want to have the better reliability, better troubleshooting, etc., then we need to also publish an event. So we will need to add, it appeared that we didn't do a great job on modeling, and we should also have an alternative path. So guest checkout failed. And we need to inform this our main process that about the failure. So because if someone selected from the UI that and at that time this could be settled, then in the meantime it might appear that someone bought something in the bar, etc., and our account is not settled anymore, right? So we need to be able to get those information back. So what's going to happen after that? So we will be listening for those events that happened for our entities, and we will get them back and also record all of them in our process. And in fact, we won't be doing just like that. We will be getting this event and calling the checkout guest. Sorry, record. Yeah, we will be doing something like that. And we will be trying to record again a next checkout account. And in this logic, we will be trying to verify whether all of the guest states that we have selected are already checked out or failed. So something, we will discuss what is this something, will trigger this command and call this, and after the logic, we will store the information that guest checkout, guest account 1 will be, was checked out. The second one was also, let's do it like that. That the first one was checkout. The second one was also checkout, but the third one wasn't. So then once we got all of the answers, then we might decide what's the end of the process. So then we could trigger group checkout completed. But in this case, in this scenario, this is not precisely true because the group checkout partially succeeded. So, and it's like, it's impossible to be partially pregnant, then it's also not partially succeeded, then it's just failed. Sorry for lame jokes. And over here, this operation will just trigger 2 events. So the one responsible for recording information about the failure and about the failure of the whole process. So right now, we have the full example of the pessimistic flow. If we would like to have an like the happy path, let's just move it here, then we could resign from this third one. And here, if we decide that we just selected 2 accounts, then here we would have just and this will be a happy path. So all of the checkout, all of the guest states that we selected were successful, and checkouts were successful, and we have the success event as a result. So questions, do you have questions about that part?
In the failure path, shouldn't we somehow check, compensate those checked outs if the group checkout failed?
Yeah, that's a good call. And it depends. In our case, like, I hope that someone will ask that question. If we are trying to model the negative scenario, then we should ask ourselves 2 questions. The first one is, what's the worst thing can happen if it fails? And how does it harm us? And the other question is, can we compensate it? So for this part, what do you think? What's the worst thing if this single guest stay failed?
It depends what we will do with the fact that some guests are checked out and some aren't. If we if the someone who initiated this group checkout has information that the process failed, he probably assumed that no one was checked out, and for example, he can tell to customers that they cannot leave, or that the room is still theirs because they didn't check out, because the process failed. But if if we record those checked out events, maybe their keys won't work and the cards to rooms won't work, and probably that's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, I agree. In this case, it depends what's the final result of the group checkout. For example, if we would like to have immediate group invoice or other group statistics, then we would probably need to add additional step just to, for example, select from the checked out or automatically select from the checked out guest stays. But in this case, I think that instead of doing some automated compensation and trying to automatically, I would probably try to discuss that with business, because it might appear that we could just show on the UI that, hey, this third one, Oscar, bought one more beer and for the account of his room, so he need to pay for that. And once he paid that and settled the account, then we can run the group checkout process once again, only for those that were not settled previously. But once we know that they are settled right now, then okay, then let's run it again. And all of those guests that were previously, then we can let them out, because, in fact, then they won't be standing probably all of the huge group and waiting for all the others to succeed to wait. So it's highly dependent on a domain. For example, if we would have an order, then yeah, if the first step was to record payment, and then we realize that we on our shipment module that we don't have this product anymore in our warehouse, then we need to compensate and try to return money. So then we would probably, once we realize that, then we would, before that, we would try to send some compensating comments. So oh, what did I just do? Yeah, so over here, we would probably then send it like that and wait for another event. But even with the money, it's quite often not possible to do compensation. So for example, in the worst case, if we try to compensate money, then we might realize that we already spend this money on something else and we don't have money to do the compensation. So what I'm trying to say that it's always compensating operation is also some sort of other business logic and something that we should discuss with business and implement. So what are your thoughts, Grzegorz, on that?
I guess in this moment it wouldn't make sense. It would make sense more to have something like partial checkout than partial group checkout than just compensating it.
Yeah, exactly.
To be sure, we are modeling is like it's group checkout is just a process, not some kind of entity, or we are assuming that there are no invariants that we have to check in case of those group checkouts.
Yes, that's correct. And you are right that sometimes this is entity. I mean, I would always model that as an entity. I see that we already after 1 hour, so sorry for just inviting you for only 1 hour, but we can continue if you have time. Then I'm open to continue. So quite often this process requires not only automated handling, but we could have like, for example, a spending. Like we have a process that can go automatically, like we are sending request, for example, for buying something in our company, like a new laptop. And then besides this automated steps that can be automatically done, there has to be someone that will be modeling, need to manually do the permission to continue. So sometimes there is also a need for some manual input, but we can also model that this manual input as some steps within that process. So that's why is it important and convenient to always model that as a command, as an event, because then we are having the clear intention of what's going on. And that's a benefit also of having some process modeled as an entity, not like a process manager or so. Okay, any other questions or concerns? Okay, then to reiterate, we have now the optimistic path, and we have also the negative scenario. And let's have a look how we could do it in code. I overestimated my capabilities and I wanted to do the live coding, which we can do, of course, in the other webinar. But let me just show you then the potential implementation, because I would like us to discuss it. So let's start with the guest day account and the events. So I modeled those events that we have and that we've seen. So guest checked in, charge recorded with the amount and some dates, and guest day ID. And we have also the guest checked out event. And the guest checked out event is, as I think Mateusz asked, so we can have an optional information about the group checkout process. We'll get to that later. And we also have this guest checked out failed event with the information about the failure. I mean, this is some optional data. There might be more into that. As you see, there is just a single reason for that right now. And we have also the aggregate. So it contains ID and balance and the current status. Those are the fields that we need for our business logic. We also have information about whether the guest stay was settled or not. And then we have a set of business operation that we can do on this entity. So check-in, record charge, record payment, etc. As you can see, as I mentioned, we are verifying whether this account is still open. If not, then we are throwing exception. But here, there is an important thing. So if we are doing checkout, then we are either returning the guest checkout event or guest checkout failed in case of the failure. And I'm using the class result. I'm not sure if you, all of you read my article about the union types and the modeling aspects. Result is just a simple structure that contains two information. One is representing the success. I should probably name it success. So it's either success or it is error. And we can create a result with one either success or error, and maybe it's just an optional. I could probably just use nullable, but it gives me more option, like I can create and explicitly say whether this value is present or not. And I can have some modifications like run this operation if the value is set. We can also have some get or default. If some of you implemented, was coding in Java, then optional is the same thing as maybe or similar, because optional in Java should be just returned. So result, so we have, at first we have validation. And here we are throwing exception. And in this case, in theory, we could also return event, a failure event. It doesn't mean that, but there is the pattern of returning results information, so error information or not, is called railway programming, because it's like a railway. So we have left or right train rail, and we are just going one way or another. But the best practice of railway programming is that you should return result, failure result, only if you can recover from it. And if it's something that might happen during the business process. If that's something that should not happen ever, in the way how our application is working, then we can throw exception. However, probably it would be better to follow the convention that we are going. So here we could also, for example, return error information instead of throwing exception. And here, I just left it here like that to have the place for discussion around that. Because let's get back here, because this process assumes that we are coding fluently and flawlessly. So we are not making any mistakes, and the network is resilient, and etc. and so on and so forth. But quite often, it might appear that our implementation is wrong. Like, how can it happen, right? But it appears that it happens. So there, usually, it's also important to have something, some guard, some timer that will, for example, say that group checkout timed out. I will send you the link to article about that, but in general, we had the case where we have a pessimistic locking, as we discussed. So if during the checkout, no one can do anything with this room or with this account, so record transaction and do other stuff until we got all of the information about the result. And it appeared that we had bugs and we didn't got those events back. And we had checkout that was hanging infinitely, and we didn't have the compensating operation from the UI to just cancel checkout, etc. And we had a rule in our this end of day process that I mentioned that is happening every night, that you cannot complete and change the business date in the hotel if you have any checkouts opened, like hanging. Then in fact, it appeared that you cannot change from the small thing, single guest checkout, the whole hotel couldn't change the date because we didn't predict that. It should not happen ever, but it happened. And there was a need to like do fixes around that almost during the night because hotel couldn't operate because couldn't switch the date. So record proper business operations. So it's always important to do checkout timeout, timeout operation, to just have the fallback and to be informed that this failed. So still, in our business logic, we can use various tactics. We can throw exceptions, we can return events, but what's most important, we need to handle that somewhere. So we can have a domain service that is taking comments and storing events. I'm using Martin and storing that as an event, but distributed process doesn't need to have event sourcing. So here you could potentially save your current state and just publish event to the outbox pattern to forward it somewhere. But the domain logic should not know about that. It might know that, yeah, I need to return some event, or I need to return the current state plus event, or whatever we prefer. I'm using event sourcing here, but you could return both or modify state and save state together with the event to publish and to forward somewhere. And if we have this separation of concerns, then in this service, we could do whatever we want. We could do even try catch with the Pokemon exception handling. So we could do try either invalid operation if we want to just handle that, or any exception that and then instead of returning event, we could also catch it here if we don't want to return events. If we want to operate on exceptions, then we could do it like that, for example, just happened and do it like it's up to you to decide what you prefer, right? So we could try catch and keep it in the business, in the infrastructure part or application part, this orchestration. So there are various ways how you can deal with that. I'm not sure which is the best one. I would probably recommend doing this Pokemon exception handling somewhere, at least in the infrastructure part, to be aware of whether something went right, went wrong. But on the other hand, we could do retries here or implement some generic retry policy. And as we are using the the optimistic concurrency here, then we should be safe. Of course, it might be that we also didn't predict everything, but you know, we cannot predict everything. So let's have a look how our group checkout would look like. So we again have a set of events so that we initiated information about those comments that we spin up, and some information that we completed or failed our process. Yeah, the main one. This is for the specific guest stay, and this is the main one. And we also have this business logic. So see, we are initiating the group checkout with the list of IDs for the guest stays. And we are recording the guest checkout initiation once we got information that they were checked out. And here, maybe sorry for a bit chaotic mode, but yeah, let's see how we could orchestrate those events. So for that, we could use Saga. And Saga is something that is started typically by event. It's a coordinator, a dummy coordinator. It can only relay on the information that it gets from event and send the comments to orchestrate the process. So once we had this group checkout initiated, then we will have this event, and then we can start the whole distributed process, because this information that we initiated the group checkout is the first step and first information to continue. And then, based on those IDs that we have in this event, then we can, for each of them, we can send a command for each of this specific event. And then, once we done it, we can send a comment to record the checkouts initiation. So this will be handled by the set of specific guest stay account, and this will be handled by the guest group checkout aggregate. And we have accordingly the checkout domain, the group checkout domain service, where we have all of those commands defined. And the first one will just create a group checkout and will result with this event that I mentioned. And then once Saga sent this comment, checkout guest, then this will be handled by the guest stay account. So it will send this specific checkout, this comment, and once it sends the record guest checkouts initiation, so we know that we already initiated those checkouts, so we know that we spin up all of those comments, then we can this will be handled by this group checkout domain service. An important thing to note here is that, see, record charge, record payment are typically coming from the UI. So for optimistic concurrency, we can use the expected version. we can send the explicit expected version. But for guest checkout, then group checkout doesn't know about the version of the specific guest stay. And Martin, but you can do it in any other tool, but Martin has it built in. So if we use the write to aggregate method, then what it's gonna do is that it will take the current state of our aggregate, take the version of it, and once we are trying to append new event, then it will check whether the version hasn't changed. So it will give us the basic guard against and making sure that our business logic was run against the current state. So what we decide, nothing happened in between. But as we have that, and as we have it also here, if we are handling the follow-up events from that happened after, for example, guest stay was checked out or failed, then once we record this completion or failure in our domain service, then we need to handle also idempotency, because all of those handlers should have the retry policy in case something fails, some transient error, timeout, whatever. It might happen that Saga will get this notification more than once, or that we will try that because we will be sending also commands asynchronously, then also command will be retried. So we will have this basic guarantee of the optimistic concurrency that if we decided in our business logic that's fine, then that means that's fine, and no one will in the meantime update our entity, because if they did, that we will get the concurrency exception and we can again retry our business logic. So what I'm aiming to is that, for example, if we are trying to record the specific guest state completion, then we should be doing that only if our group checkout is initiated and we haven't processed this checkout completion before. And I'm checking that with the whether this isn't already completed. And I have this helper method, maybe if, which is extremely simple. I already show you that. So I'm passing some check, and if it's fine, then I'm returning maybe. If not, then just empty. So that so there is no result of this operation. Let's have a look again. So if the group checkout is in an expected state, and if the guest stay hasn't been already completed, then I can verify whether there are still any ongoing checkouts. So for example, whether we handle 3 out of 3 guest stay checkouts. And if we haven't, if there are any outgoings, so for example, this is 2nd out of 3, then we are just returning event about the specific checkout completion. And if not, then we are also, so we processed all of the checkouts, then we can also try to finalize and return this final group checkout event. So for example, that means that we process all of the checkouts, and we also would like to return additional event that is like a tombstone event that is marking our group checkout as completed or failed. So that's the logic here. And if we get back to our service, then get an update. In that case, if we have this maybe, then if our handling logic was like succeeded, returned some result, then we are appending this event. But if not, then we are just ignoring it because that means that we already processed that. So that's the trick, how we could handle optimistic concurrency if we don't know the explicit expected version. Of course, it's not bulletproof, not always will be able to have such ifs, but yeah, that's one of the options. So let's go back to our Saga. So Saga, again, it's a simple coordinator. I prefer to have Saga. If you'd like, you don't need to have Saga. You can have a separate set of event handlers, and that will be named then choreography. There are a lot of people that love choreography. I like to have a single place where I see the explanation of the process, because this Saga is pretty, in my opinion, clear to read and understand what's happening in our process. And as we discussed with Grzegorz already, then it's better to still have some entity, because then we have a clear place where we have all of the events that we see here. So we can just have a look on this stream if we are using event sourcing on the, or the specific entity, if we flattened entity with the latest state, if we are not using event sourcing, but we have a single place and single source of truth. And if there is a need to perform some manual operations additional, then we can do that. We can just expose yet another comment and even use explicit expected version here and guard us against unwanted changes. And there is also third option, which I don't recommend. So we could merge Saga together with the group checkout entity and form it into a single class, and then it would be process manager. So process manager is a stateful process, but then it's much harder to maintain it, in my opinion. And it's because for then we need to, at the same time, if our process changes, then we need to quickly think how to migrate our current process state. And we have everything mashed out, because we will have like the event handlers together with comments, and we will need to try to understand everything at once. And even in the simple process, we see that there are already two entities that are taking part in this process. And as we discussed, usually there is even more. And so it's better to, in my opinion, to have an autonomous split and clear responsibility split, rather than trying to group it together in some sort of process manager. Okay, so questions. Should I recap something or explain something in more details?
Can you show group checkout domain servers again?
Sure.
Okay, and where did you have those ifs? The state is something, then something.
For example, here.
Okay, and this is still the domain servers?
No, this is aggregate.
Oh, okay. I was curious that I thought status is a property of the domain servers.
No.
And I thought that that domain servers have state. And
no.
Okay.
It's so see here we can just return. Unfortunately, C# doesn't have discriminated unions, and I didn't want to introduce some separate interface, artificial interface, so I have to return object array, but typically it's one or another. And the other option, for example, just to show you how we could handle result, so checkout guest. So see, checkout is returning result. So if it is success or failure, even if we are not doing the distributed processing or asynchronous processing, then we might consider doing that in our domain, because domain then decides and is not throwing exception, it's just performing the business logic and returning some result. And then having this result, we can have a map or switch methods. And we could, for example, say that if it succeeded, then here we are storing appending events. But if not, then we are throwing some exception or doing some other plumbing or specific handling. I'm doing here that I'm just returning this event, even either it is successful or failed. But if we return this map, then if we have this map or switch, then we can, on the infrastructure side, we can do any other handling, infrastructure handling or application handling, depending on what we want to do with our information that we got from our domain logic. So I'm not saying that you should be doing that, but I wanted to show you that that's also possible and worth considering at least. Any other questions?
I'm curious how, because we discussed it before that you wouldn't compensate in this domain, and I understand why, but I have similar case when I have some kind of batching operation that has to invoke commands on my entities, and I have requirement that, or maybe not requirement, but from the user side, it has to look like it is synchronous. It is run synchronously. So if there is a user interface is waiting for the answer, and if the one of the operations fails, that whole batching operation has to be not removed, but
compensated.
Yes. Right now I'm doing it in transaction, because I know in my I can do this because there won't be as many things to as many entities to update that it could be a problem. But I was wondering, how would you approach it if there would be more of the entities?
Yeah, so maybe let's start with compensating, how to compensate. I have another example of Saga here. See, this is a bit different, but it's not much different. I have some marker interfaces to mark that this is event handler. But the pessimistic flow in this case is that we got product was out of stock. So like I mentioned, user already paid, because paying is a first step of the process. So once we got information that shopping cart was finalized, so completed, then we are initiating order, and then we are sending request payment. And then user is paying for that. This process probably will be asynchronous, because user, this will be at first asynchronous plus manual operation, because user will need to type and select the payment method, etc. So something will pop out on the screen, etc. But we will be waiting for the results. So either payment finalized or failed, etc. But let's say that it succeeded. We recorded this payment information, And then we decide that we would like to send the package. And it appeared that there is no on warehouse. Even our system was saying that it is, but it was not. Then here we can send a command to cancel that. And then see, technically there is no difference between compensation and the regular handling, but we are just sending command and waiting for the result of the compensation. But regarding trying to cheat and show that this is synchronous, then yeah, we could, one of the options is to run this Saga in process as you do. And in some cases it might be fine as long as you're fine that your process will die and you will have something hanging in between. Or the other option is just to wrap all of that with the unit of work, but then you are risking that you will have a lot of deadlocks. That might happen. That's the risk of long living transactions. But what you can do also is to just send it asynchronously as it is and use some sort of long polling. So the request will be kept open, but everything in between will be done asynchronously. But on your request, you can continuously ask, like try to access the, for example, group checkout entity and verify whether it is in the completed state. And if it is, then return results. If not, then continue polling. And this is some potential option, but then you need to be sure that this process won't last long. Even if it's asynchronous, then it's pretty fast. Because if you have too many open connections, then you might exhaust your web server connection pool, and this might also result in something wrong. So typically the best option is to either use some sort of WebSocket, so push notifications, or have endpoint with a status of operation, and then or just something like mixture of those things. So have the long polling with the clear cut after, for example, 2 seconds. And if it's clear cut, then then UI should be request some endpoint with the information about the status, and then try to ask it continuously if it's finished or not. So it can be also tricked on the UI. So UI can just show that it is in progress, but it's using a mixture of long polling and continuous polling. You can, for example, also return from your endpoint. There is a HTTP header called retry after. So you can, on the backend side, you can say like, okay, try to ask again after this period. Does it answer your question, Grzegorz?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thanks.
I have following question, but about the you said that doing a transaction it can cause deadlocks, and I was wondering if I'm using Marten underneath, is it possible to, or other kind of event store, is it possible to cause deadlock?
In Marten it is, because you are still, I mean, appending event. Yeah, it is possible, because you are also updating the stream table, because besides appending event, the stream table with the information about the current version, etc., is updated. So this is rarely happening, but in the worst case, it might happen.
I see. Okay.
or if you are using this pessimistic locking that Martin gives you, then potentially this could happen. I mean, you will need to have a really high traffic, and but it's possible. In event store DB, probably not, because there is only two structures, event and stream, and you are just appending new data. However, probably you might have some clashes with the positions or data in the disk, but yeah, for sure, there is no such thing precisely as deadlock in event store DB. More like a timeout, probably. Because internally, event store DB is implemented as a set of queues. So it just pushing messages from one place to another, hacking, knacking, etc. This is just complex messaging systems underneath. But most of databases are implemented like that. Okay, do you have any other questions?
No, thanks.
Steven, do you have something more to ask or add?
Nope, not right now.
Okay, so maybe question from me, was it clear enough or is it still blurry, the explanation and all those concerns around distributed processing? What are your thoughts?
It was a bit hard to follow at the beginning because I don't know anything about this domain, but after some time it was okay. After questions from questions and modeling more of the process, I think it was easier to follow up.
Yeah, for sure, this was kind of experiment, and it was a bit chaotic. Sorry for taking you longer time than I initially sent you information, but I hope that that was helpful. We can try next time to also play with some idea and maybe done it in a more structured way. So we could probably, if for the next webinar, it would be better to start preparation a bit earlier to discuss and maybe send some information up front. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful, and I like that there was a two-way communication, not only broadcast for me, and I personally would like to continue such attitude and such approach.
It was good. I got to go back and watch it just because in the US, it's the meeting just happens pretty much right as things start getting busy here. So I'm having to jump back and forth while I'm listening. But I enjoyed walking through, seeing the C#. I went through the Java example quite a bit. So it was nice to see it more or less converted over to the C# side.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen, for the feedback. So this board will be available for you. I already pushed the changes to the repo with the code. I will need to finish those changes. I'm not sure precisely when, but I will open the PR so you could also see that and also follow through that part. Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you for joining the webinar. And if you are watching that from re-recording, then please send me also a feedback. What are your thoughts? And you guys, if you have some more ideas, then I'm open. As I said, we can try to crunch your real domain and discuss some specific challenge that you have in your project. So yeah, I'm open for suggestions how to make those webinars useful and helpful and effective and interesting for you.
Thank you very much.
So, okay, thank you. Have a great day. And bye. I will try to upload the webinar recording today, and we'll send it later on. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.